Welcome to the Parsha Perspective. Each week, we will delve deep in a weekly Torah portion to find a practical and insightful way to enhance your daily life. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Rabbi Shalom Yamini, and each week we will look into the weekly Torah portion to find practical and insightful ways to enhance your daily life. This week's Parsha Perspective is in honor of our homeland, Eretz Yisroel. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu, may God continue to protect our brave soldiers, and may God comfort all those who are grieving and give healing to our nation. This week's Parsha Perspective is in loving memory of Edward ben Ephraim, Shlomo ben Edward, and Yerachmiah Daniel ben Gedalia. May their souls be uplifted, and may their memories be a blessing. This week's Torah portion is Parshas Vayechi, Beyond the Past, and our Parsha concludes the first book of the Torah, Sefer Bereishis. Our Parsha begins by telling us that Yaakov spent the last 17 years of his life in Egypt with peace and fulfillment, surrounded by his family after decades of struggle. As his life neared its end, Yaakov called for Yosef and told him to swear that he would not bury him in Egypt but in Eretz Yisroel alongside his ancestors, his father and grandfather in the Ma'aras Machpelah. Yosef swore to honor his father's last request. Yaakov then blesses Yosef's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, elevating to the status of tribes and his own sons within the Jewish people. And through this act, Yaakov ensures that Yosef's legacy would hold a unique and eternal place in Jewish history. And as his final moments began, Yaakov gathered his 12 sons. He blesses each one individually, assigning them their role as the founders of the tribes of Israel. And at the age of 147 years old, Yaakov Avinu passes away, peacefully surrounded by his family. Yosef HaTzadik received permission from Pari to bury his father in Eretz Yisroel. So, accompanied by his brothers and a large delegation of Egyptian officials, Yosef fulfills his father's final wish. And Yaakov is buried in Hebron in the Ma'aras Machpelah, in the cave of the matriarch and patriarchs, alongside his grandparents. The Parsha concludes with Yosef passing away at 110 years old, and before his death, Yosef expresses his unwavering faith that God would redeem the Jewish people, and he would bring them to the Promised Land. And he made his brothers swear to carry his remains with them when they left Egypt, a promise Moshe Rabbeinu fulfilled many, many generations later. However, a question comes to mind. The Torah reveals something very interesting. After Yaakov's burial, it presents a striking shift in the relationship between Yosef and his brothers. Yosef, as we know, already forgave his brothers for selling him into Egypt. He already told them that what they intended for harm, God intended for good. Yet suddenly, after their father's passing, the brothers were gripped by fear. They send a message begging for forgiveness, and Yosef responds with tears rather than with anger, reassuring them once again, but why is this moment necessary at all? What changed after Yaakov's death that caused the brothers to fear retribution? If Yosef's forgiveness was real, why did they believe it might vanish the moment their father was no longer there to protect him? Why did they send a message begging for forgiveness? The Chizkuni, Rav Chizkiah ben Mano, a French rabbi from the 13th century, gives us a simple explanation. And he writes that the brothers' fear stemmed from something they saw after returning from Yaakov's burial. As they traveled from Hebron back to Egypt, Yosef passed by the pit which his brothers had thrown him in many years earlier. And at that moment, Yosef made a bracha, a blessing thanking God for performing a miracle that happened to him in this place. And his intention was to acknowledge the hashgacha pratis, the divine providence, recognizing how God transforms suffering into salvation. Yet when the brothers heard this, they became afraid. They interpreted Yosef's words differently, assuming he was standing at the site of his betrayal, had opened his old wounds once again. And they feared that that painful memory had resurfaced, and Yosef's forgiveness that sustained during their father's lifetime might now give way to resentment. According to the Chizkuni, this misunderstanding explains why the brothers sent the message. Nothing changed in Yosef. What changed was the brothers' perception. and was shaped by lingering guilt, by lingering fear, which led them to believe that forgiveness might not continue without Yaakov's presence. However, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory gives a deeper, more profound explanation in his book Covenant and Conversation. And he writes that while Yosef had truly forgiven his brothers, the brothers themselves were still living with unresolved guilt. Rabbi Sachs explains that forgiveness and reconciliation are not always experienced at the same pace. Yosef had reframed the past through faith, through bitachon, and through emunah, seeing his suffering as a part of the divine plan rather than a personal betrayal. His brothers, the rest of the Shvatim, however, never fully internalized that transformation. For them, the memory of what they had done remained heavy, unresolved, and frightening. And as long as Yaakov was alive, his presence served as a stabilizing force within the family. His moral authority held old fears at bay, allowing the brothers to believe that Yosef's forgiveness was secure. However, once Yaakov passed away, that sense of protection disappeared. The brothers were forced to face the past without their father standing between them and their fear of the consequences of their actions. Rabbi Sachs points out that their message to Yosef did not prompt anything by what Yosef said or did, but rather emerged from within them. They feared that Yosef's forgiveness might have been sustained out of respect from their father rather from true inner reconciliation. And in their minds, once Yaakov Avinu passed away, the past could resurface with full force. However, Yosef's reaction reveals the depth of his character. The pasuk says, "Vayefke," and he cried. He did not respond with anger. He did not respond with defensiveness. He cried. Rabbi Sachs explains that Yosef's tears reflect the pain of realizing that despite his kindness, despite his generosity and reassurance, his brothers still did not believe that they were truly forgiven. And their fear showed that while he has moved forward, they were still trapped in the moment of betrayal. According to Rabbi Sachs, this teaches us a powerful truth about human relationships. Forgiveness alone is not always enough. Reconciliation also requires the courage to accept the forgiveness and to believe that the future no longer is dictated by the past. Without inner repair, even most sincere forgiveness can feel fragile and conditional. And Yosef shows what true faith is not only about trusting Hashem, but allowing that trust to heal relationships and to release the guilt from the past. It demands the courage to believe that the past does not have absolute power over us, that even the deepest betrayals does not determine the future. And when emunah, when faith in God is real, does not remain abstract. It reshapes how we remember, how we forgive, and how we carry ourselves forward. This lesson is ever more relevant as we strive to live with integrity, to follow Hashem's commandments and to follow His Torah and mitzvahs. And we also take responsibility when we fall short. And we ask forgiveness sincerely, yet we often struggle to believe that our forgiveness is truly complete. We often don't believe that our forgiveness is enduring. And even after doing tshuva, we continue carrying the mistakes quietly, allowing our past failures to shape how we see ourselves. However, in a time where anti-Semitism is openly resurging and coming to a boiling point, Jewish pride requires courage. And that weight cannot define us. Our faith, our emunah, bitachon on Hashem, our values, our willingness to stand visibly as Jews must take precedent over the self-doubt. And we are meant to stand facing forward, anchored in our emunah, anchored in our faith, and unapologetic in our identity as Jewish people and the chosen nation by HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be His ambassadors on this earth. And we shall be strengthened by that purpose. In our daily life, it is imperative to understand that letting go of the past is not letting go of who we are, but releasing what no longer serves us. Carrying regret or failure, even guilt beyond its lesson does not preserve our identity. It restricts growth and limits possibility. As long as we remain anchored to what was, our potential stays untapped and untouched. And we leave it behind with self-doubt, and progress requires courage to stop living in old moments and move forward with intention and with emunah, with belief. And true success begins when we refuse to let the past define us and choose instead to build a future reaching far beyond what we thought was possible. There's a profound quote that brings us home. The past explains us, but it does not own us. and the future belongs to those who are brave enough to believe they still can get it. Have a great weekend and good Shabbos. Thank you for tuning in to the Parsha Perspective. Check out our website, theparshaperspective.com. Send thoughts and comments to theparshaperspective@gmail.com. Till next time, thanks for listening.